The morning sun cut through the warehouse windows of Parker Logistics, casting long shadows across concrete floors stained with decades of freight and diesel. Kurt Roberts moved between shipping containers with the quiet efficiency of a man who had spent years moving through spaces far more dangerous than this. His worn steel-toed boots barely made a sound. His faded blue work shirt stretched across shoulders that seemed too broad for a dock supervisor. Oil marked his calloused hands. Sweat beaded on his forehead. But his eyes told a different story. They swept the loading bay in constant assessment, measuring distances, noting exits, tracking every worker's position without conscious thought. He was 41 years old, single father, 14 years removed from a life that still visited him in dreams he never discussed. To the other dock workers at Parker Logistics, Kurt was just the quiet guy on the morning shift, the one who never talked about his past, the one who always volunteered for overtime, the one who could lift more than men half his age and never seemed to tire. Nobody knew about the metals locked in a box beneath his bed. Nobody knew about the operations that never made the news. Nobody knew that the man loading pallets at 6 in the morning had once been called Ghost by men whose names were classified. Delta Force, 15 years, mercy missions that governments denied, extractions that historians would never record. His daughter Lily was the only thing that mattered now. 10 years old, bright eyes, crooked smile, lungs that sometimes forgot how to work properly, severe asthma that sent them to the emergency room at least twice a year, medications that cost more than his rent, a condition that required stability and presence and a father who came home every night. That was why he loaded trucks now. That was why he counted every dollar. That was why the man who had once extracted hostages from compounds in countries that denied his existence now punched a clock and said yes ma'am and kept his head down. The loading dock hummed with activity. Forklifts beeped, chains rattled. Workers shouted coordinates to each other across the vast space. Kurt guided a pallet into position with practiced ease when he noticed the commotion near the main office. A black Mercedes had pulled up to the warehouse entrance. 3 figures emerged. 2 men in expensive suits flanking a woman who walked like she owned the ground beneath her feet, which technically she did. Julia Parker, 34 years old, CEO of Parker Logistics since her father's death 3 years ago. Harvard MBA, Forbes 30, under 30. The youngest executive to take a regional shipping company and transform it into a national powerhouse. She was tall, sharp cheekbones, hair pulled back so tight it looked painful, eyes that calculated worth in decimal points. Kurt had seen her twice in his 18 months at the company, both times from a distance. Both times she had been firing someone. Today felt different. There was tension in her stride. The men beside her carried tablets and spoke in urgent whispers. Kurt's instincts prickled. Something was wrong. He kept loading, kept his head down, none of his business. But his eyes tracked her movement across the warehouse floor. Old habits, the kind that kept men alive in places where a moment's inattention meant death. Julia stopped near the dispatch station. Her voice carried across the open space. "Where is the security assessment for the Morrison Stadium contract?" The dispatch manager fumbled with papers. Sweat bloomed across his forehead. "Miss Parker, we submitted that last week through the standard channels. I'm looking at a $40 million contract to provide logistics for the biggest sporting event this city has ever hosted." Julia's voice could have frozen steel. "And I'm being told our security protocols are inadequate, that we need additional vetting, that there are concerns about our perimeter management." She turned in a slow circle. Her gaze swept the warehouse like a blade. "Who here has security experience? Anyone?" "The contract requires consultation with someone who has tactical background." Silence. Workers found sudden interest in their boots. Forklifts stopped moving. Kurt's jaw tightened. He kept stacking pallets. An older worker named Frank shuffled forward. Frank had been at Parker Logistics for 30 years. He was 62 and tired and had seen enough young executives come and go. He pointed toward Kurt. "Roberts over there. He was military." Don't know the details, but I seen his discharge papers when HR was processing something. Said something about special operations. Julia's eyes snapped to Kurt. He felt her gaze like a targeting laser. You. She walked toward him. Her heels clicked against concrete. What's your name? Kurt straightened slowly, set down the manifest he was holding. Kurt Roberts, ma'am. She looked him up and down, the oil stains, the worn uniform, the calluses. Her lip curled almost imperceptibly. Special operations. She let the words hang. The skepticism was palpable. I served, ma'am. Kurt's voice was flat, neutral. Years ago. Where? What unit? I'm not at liberty to discuss specifics. Julia laughed. It was not a kind sound. Not at liberty. She turned to her assistants. You hear that? The warehouse worker isn't at liberty. She looked back at Kurt. Let me explain something. I need someone with actual credentials to review our security plan for the Morrison Stadium event. In 3 days, this company will be responsible for all logistics during the championship game. 50,000 people in attendance, national television coverage. And I have federal consultants telling me our protocols aren't sufficient. Kurt said nothing. Julia stepped closer. Her perfume was expensive and aggressive. If you actually have relevant experience, I need you to speak up. Now, this contract is worth more than you'll make in 10 lifetimes. The championship game. Kurt knew about it. Everyone did. The stadium would be packed, cameras everywhere, dignitaries in attendance, the kind of event that attracted attention from people with bad intentions. His mind was already running scenarios, access points, crowd flow, vulnerable sectors, the thousand small details that separated a secure venue from a catastrophe waiting to happen. I could take a look at the assessment. His voice was quiet. If you want. Julia's eyebrows rose. She exchanged glances with her assistants. One of them smirked. You could take a look. She repeated the words slowly. A dock worker is going to review a federal security consultation. I didn't say I was qualified. Kurt met her eyes, said I could take a look. Something flickered across Julia's face, annoyance or curiosity or both. Fine. She pulled a tablet from her assistant's hands and thrust it toward Kurt. Let's see what the special operations expert thinks. Kurt took the tablet. His calloused fingers looked wrong against the sleek surface. Workers had gathered at the edges of the loading bay, watching, whispering. He scrolled through the document. His eyes moved fast, faster than Julia expected. His expression didn't change, but something shifted in his posture, a subtle straightening, a focus that hadn't been there before. This is wrong. Excuse me? Kurt looked up. Your perimeter assessment, it's based on standard crowd control metrics. But Morrison Stadium has 17 service access points that aren't included in this analysis. The document assumes all delivery vehicles enter through the main loading zone, but the stadium's original blueprints show 4 additional underground access tunnels from when it was built in the 60s. 2 of those tunnels connect to the old metro maintenance system. Julia's face went still. Also, Kurt continued scrolling. Your vendor credentialing process has a 48-hour gap between badge issuance and background verification completion. That's 48 hours where someone with a fraudulent identity could access restricted areas. He paused on a diagram. And the staging area for broadcast equipment. It's positioned directly beneath the main structural supports of the East Grandstand. 30,000 pounds of equipment creating a single point of failure. Silence. Complete silence. Julia's assistant stared at the tablet, then at Kurt, then at each other. How do you know about the underground tunnels? Julia's voice had changed. The dismissiveness was gone. Kurt handed back the tablet. His face revealed nothing. I know stadiums, ma'am. I know access points. And I know what this document is missing. Julia studied him. For the first time, she seemed to actually see him. Not the oil stains or the worn boots, but something else. Something that made her uncomfortable. Who are you? Kurt turned back to his pallets. Nobody important. Just someone who pays attention. Julia didn't move. Her assistants shifted nervously behind her. Mr. Roberts. Her voice had an edge now. If you have information relevant to this contract, I need to hear it. All of it. Kurt kept working. With respect, ma'am, I gave you what I saw. What you do with it is your business. I need to finish this shipment. Julia's face flushed. People didn't dismiss her. People didn't turn their backs when she was speaking. She had clawed her way to the top of a company that had almost collapsed under her father's death. She had faced boardrooms full of men who doubted her, and she had crushed every single one of them. A warehouse worker was not going to walk away from her. Stop. Her voice cracked across the loading bay. I'm talking to you. Kurt paused, didn't turn around. Whatever your background is, whatever you think you know. I have federal consultants, actual professionals, people with verifiable credentials. They've reviewed this plan extensively. Julia's voice rose. And you're telling me that a dock supervisor saw something they missed? Yes, ma'am. Based on what exactly? Kurt turned then. His eyes met hers. Something in them made her take half a step back. Based on the fact that I've spent time in places where missing a detail like those tunnels gets people killed. Based on spending 15 years learning how to see what others don't see. Based on knowing that 50,000 people in one place is a target and a responsibility and 1,000 different ways for things to go wrong. He held her gaze. And based on the fact that your consultants probably never had to plan an extraction through a building that looked safe on paper but had 7 hidden access points that insurgents had been using for months. The loading bay had gone completely silent. Even the forklifts had stopped. Julia's face was unreadable, then it hardened. I don't know who you think you are. Her voice was ice. But I don't take operational advice from people who load boxes for a living. Whatever you did in the military, it's clearly not relevant to modern security logistics. This conversation is over. She turned sharply. Her assistant scrambled to follow. Kurt watched her go, his jaw tight, his hands steady despite the frustration burning in his chest. Frank appeared beside him, shaking his head slowly. You shouldn't have pushed back. She doesn't forget when people challenge her. Kurt picked up his manifest. Didn't say anything. Frank lingered. That stuff you said, about the tunnels, the access points, was that real? Kurt looked at the older man. Everything I said was real, and if they don't fix those gaps, something bad is going to happen at that stadium. That night, Kurt sat at the small kitchen table of their 2-bedroom apartment. The walls were thin enough to hear the neighbor's television. The furniture was secondhand but clean. The only thing that looked new was the medical equipment in the corner. Nebulizer, peak flow meter, emergency inhaler always within reach. Lily sat across from him doing homework. Her dark hair fell across her face as she concentrated on math problems. She was small for her age. The asthma had stunted her growth some, but she was fierce in ways that reminded Kurt of her mother. Dad. Lily looked up. What's 7 times 8? 56. She scribbled the answer, then looked at him more carefully. You're doing the thing. What thing? The staring thing. When you look at stuff but you're not really looking, like you're somewhere else. Kurt forced a smile. Just thinking about work, kiddo. Lily set down her pencil. Was it hard today? He thought about Julia Parker, about the security document, about the 50,000 people who would fill Morrison Stadium in 3 days. A little. But it's okay. How was school? They talked about her day, about her friend Maria who had gotten in trouble for talking in class, about the book report she was writing on a story about a girl who trained dragons, about whether they could maybe get a dog someday when they had a house with a yard. Kurt listened to every word. He memorized the way her eyes lit up when she described the dragon book. He noticed how her breathing was even tonight. Good days were precious. He had learned never to take them for granted. After dinner, he helped her with the nebulizer treatment. The machine hummed its familiar rhythm. Lily breathed in the medicated mist while Kurt read to her from the dragon book. Her eyes grew heavy. Her breathing deepened. He carried her to bed and tucked the covers around her small frame. "Love you, Bug. Love you, Dad." Her voice was already thick with sleep. "You're the best dad in the whole world." He stood in her doorway for a long moment, watching her breathe, counting the seconds between each exhale, the same way he had counted 1,000 other things in 1,000 other moments when seconds meant everything. His phone buzzed, unknown number. He stepped into the hallway before answering. "Roberts." The voice on the other end was clipped. "Professional." "This is Colonel Mitchell. We need to talk about Morrison Stadium." Kurt's blood went cold. "I'm retired, Colonel. Whatever this isn't optional ghost." The colonel's voice cut through his protest. "We've got chatter, credible threat assessment. Something's being planned for that championship game, and we need people on the ground who know what to look for." Kurt leaned against the wall, closed his eyes. He could feel the weight of the metals in that box beneath his bed, the weight of every mission, every life saved, every friend buried. "I have a daughter." His voice was barely a whisper. "I can't do this anymore. I know about Lily." Mitchell's voice softened slightly. "I know what you gave up and why. But Kurt, we're talking about 50,000 civilians. We're talking about an attack that could make national news for all the wrong reasons. We've been monitoring communications from a cell that's been dark for years. They're active again, and they're focused on that stadium." Silence stretched between them. "What do you need?" "We need you to assess the venue, find the gaps, tell us where they're going to try to get in." Mitchell paused. "We've been trying to work with the private security company handling logistics, but they won't listen. Their CEO shut down federal consultation because she doesn't want delays on her contract. Julia Parker, you know her? We've met." Kurt's voice was flat. "She's not interested in input from people like me? Then we have a problem. Because right now, the only thing standing between that stadium and a potential mass casualty event is a woman who cares more about her $40 million contract than she does about actual security." Kurt thought about the document he had reviewed, the tunnels, the credentialing gaps, the staging area beneath the structural supports. Julia Parker had dismissed every concern, but 50,000 people would be in those seats. Families, children. People like Lily who just wanted to watch a game and go home. "I'll do what I can." "Good." Mitchell's voice carried relief. "We'll have assets in the area, but they can't move without confirmation of threat location. You're our eyes, Ghost. Find the gap. Find where they're coming in." The line went dead. Kurt stood in the dark hallway of his small apartment. His daughter sleeping peacefully 10 feet away. His past reaching through the phone to drag him back into a world he had tried so hard to leave behind. He walked to his bedroom, knelt beside the bed, pulled out the metal box he hadn't opened in years. Inside were the medals, the commendations, the folded flag from his best friend's funeral, and a worn photograph of his unit. 12 men who had called themselves the Ghost Squad, only 4 still alive. Kurt touched the photograph, then closed the box. Some ghosts never stayed buried. The next morning, Kurt arrived at Parker Logistics before dawn, but he wasn't there to load trucks. He was there to access the company's logistics database for the Morrison Stadium contract. His credentials as dock supervisor gave him limited system access, enough to pull the delivery schedules, the vendor lists, the staging timelines. He spent 2 hours mapping every entry point, every delivery window, every moment when security would be stretched thin. The gaps were worse than he had thought. The underground tunnels weren't just unmonitored, they were actively being used as overflow storage by a subcontractor that had cut corners on their credentialing. Dozens of workers with temporary badges were accessing secure areas without proper vetting. And there was something else. A pattern in the delivery schedules that didn't make sense. 3 separate vendors had requested access to the same restricted area at the same time, the broadcast equipment staging zone, the one positioned beneath the East Grandstand supports. Kurt's instincts screamed. He printed the schedules, the vendor lists, the access logs. He compiled everything into a folder and walked toward the executive offices on the upper level. Julia Parker's assistant blocked his path before he reached the door. "You can't be up here." The young man's voice dripped with disdain. "This floor is for executive personnel only. I need to see Ms. Parker. She's in meetings all day. Whatever your concern is, you can submit it through the standard channels." Kurt held up the folder. "This can't wait. There's a security issue with the stadium contract." The assistant's eyes rolled. "Security concerns have already been addressed. The federal consultation was completed last week. Ms. Parker personally approved the final protocols. The protocols are wrong." Kurt kept his voice level. "There are gaps that could get people killed." Movement behind the assistant. Julia Parker emerged from her office, phone pressed to her ear. She saw Kurt and her expression darkened. What is he doing here? The assistant stepped aside. "He claims there's a security issue, ma'am. I was just explaining that." Julia ended her call, her eyes fixed on Kurt with undisguised irritation. "Mr. Roberts, I thought I made myself clear yesterday. Your input is not required. 50,000 people." Kurt's voice didn't waver. "That's how many will be in those seats tomorrow. Families, children, people who trust that the company handling logistics has done its job. We have done our job." Julia's voice rose. "I have signed documents from federal consultants confirming our protocols meet every standard." Kurt stepped forward. "Your consultants never walked the tunnels. They never checked the subcontractor credentials. They never noticed that 3 vendors who have never worked together before all requested access to the same restricted area at the same time." He held out the folder. "This is what they missed." Julia didn't take it. Her jaw was tight. Her eyes blazed. "I don't know what you're trying to prove, but this company's reputation is built on execution, on delivering results, on not being distracted by paranoid fantasies from employees who are clearly out of their depth. This isn't paranoia." Kurt's voice dropped low. "I've seen what happens when security gaps get exploited. I've carried the bodies of people who died because someone decided protocols were good enough." Something flickered in Julia's eyes. She hesitated. Then her phone rang. She glanced at the screen. Her face went pale. She answered without looking away from Kurt. "Yes." She listened. Her expression shifted through confusion to disbelief, to something that looked almost like fear. "When did this? How many?" She lowered the phone slowly. Her assistant stepped forward. "Ms. Parker, is everything all right?" Julia stared at Kurt. "That was the FBI. They've received credible intelligence about a potential threat at Morrison Stadium. They're requesting full cooperation with our security protocols." Kurt felt no satisfaction, only the cold weight of confirmation. Julia's voice was barely audible. "They asked specifically if we had consulted with military specialists about our venue assessment." She swallowed hard. "They mentioned underground access tunnels." The folder was still in Kurt's hand. He held it out again. This time she took it. 2 hours later, Kurt stood in the Parker Logistics conference room. The table was covered with stadium blueprints, security assessments, vendor credentials. FBI liaisons filled half the chairs. Julia sat at the head of the table. Her earlier arrogance had evaporated. She looked smaller somehow, frightened. Colonel Mitchell appeared via secure video link. His face filled the screen at the far end of the room. "Kurt, good to have you back, even temporarily." Julia's head snapped toward Kurt. "Back?" Kurt ignored her. "What's the latest on the threat assessment?" Mitchell's expression was grim. "Cell we've been tracking has gone dark in the last 12 hours. That usually means they're in final preparation. Best estimate is they're planning something for tomorrow's game. Method unknown, but we believe they intend to exploit infrastructure weaknesses." "The tunnels." Kurt pointed to the blueprint. "There are 4 underground access points that connect to the old metro system. 2 of them aren't on any current security map. We need those locations." Mitchell leaned forward. "Can you get our teams down there tonight?" Kurt nodded. "I'll guide them personally." Julia stood suddenly. Her chair scraped against the floor. "Wait." She looked around the room. Will someone please explain what is happening? Who is this man? Mitchell's voice came through the speakers. Miss Parker, Kurt Roberts served 15 years in Delta Force. He specialized in infrastructure assessment and threat neutralization. His call sign was Ghost. He has more experience with venue security than anyone currently working for your company or the federal consultation team you hired. Julia's face drained of color. He tried to warn you, Mitchell continued. He identified every gap in your security plan yesterday, and you dismissed him. The room went silent. Julia looked at Kurt, really looked at him. The oil-stained shirt, the calloused hands, the quiet man who loaded trucks and never talked about his past. I didn't know. Kurt's voice was flat. You didn't ask. Before Julia could respond, alarms began blaring. Red lights flashed. An FBI agent grabbed his radio. Shots fired at the stadium. Security team requesting backup. Repeat, we have active shooters at Morrison Stadium. Kurt was moving before anyone else. How many? The agent listened to his earpiece. At least 4. They came through some kind of underground access. Our teams can't locate the entry point. Kurt grabbed a tactical vest from the supply case the FBI had brought. The tunnels. He looked at Julia. I need the original construction blueprints, the ones from 1962, not the digitized versions. The original paper copies that show the maintenance access that was sealed during renovation. Julia's hands were shaking. I don't even know if those exist. They exist. Every municipality keeps original construction documents. Kurt's voice was steel. Call the city archives. Call the mayor's office. Call whoever you have to call. I need those blueprints in the next 15 minutes or people are going to die. He was out the door before she could respond. The ride to the stadium took 11 minutes. Kurt sat in the back of an FBI tactical vehicle reviewing aerial photos on a tablet, counting access points, measuring distances, running scenarios. His phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. 4 tangos confirmed. East Grandstand, possible explosives. Kurt's blood went cold. The broadcast equipment staging area. The 30,000 pounds of gear positioned beneath the structural supports. If they had placed explosives in that zone, a detonation could collapse the entire east side of the stadium. The game wasn't scheduled until tomorrow. The stadium was supposed to be empty, but security teams were already on site. Maintenance crews, early vendors, maybe 200 people in a building designed for 50,000. 200 people who had no idea what was coming. The tactical vehicle screeched to a halt outside the stadium's main entrance. Kurt was out before the wheels stopped turning. FBI agents flanked him as they approached the security checkpoint. Gunfire echoed from somewhere deep inside the structure. Screams, the sound of running feet. A security guard stumbled toward them, blood on his uniform, terror in his eyes. They came out of nowhere. He gasped, from underground. We didn't even know those passages existed. Kurt grabbed the man's shoulders. Steady. How many did you see? 4, maybe 5. They had equipment, bags. They headed toward the east side, the staging area. Kurt released the guard, turned to the FBI team leader. I need 4 of your best. We're going in through the service corridors on the west side. That will put us behind their position. The team leader hesitated. We should wait for the full tactical response. People are dying right now. Kurt's voice cut through the chaos. Every minute we wait is another minute they have to complete whatever they're planning. He held the man's gaze. I've done this before, more times than I can count. Trust me or don't, but decide now. The team leader studied Kurt's face. Whatever he saw there made him nod. 4 agents stepped forward. Kurt led them into the stadium. The service corridors were dark. Emergency lighting cast everything in red. Kurt moved through the shadows with a silence that seemed impossible for a man his size. The agents behind him struggled to match his pace. His mind mapped the building as they moved. Counting steps, noting structural details, listening for sounds that didn't belong. There, a faint echo from ahead, metal on metal. the sound of equipment being positioned. Kurt raised a fist. The team stopped. He pointed to two agents and gestured toward a parallel corridor. Flanking position. They nodded and moved. Kurt led the remaining two toward the sound. Slow, controlled, each step deliberate. They emerged into the staging area beneath the East Grandstand. Broadcast equipment towered around them. Cables snaked across the floor. And there in the center of the space, four figures worked with focused intensity. They were positioning charges, shaped explosives designed to maximize structural damage. Kurt counted 6 packages already in place, enough to bring down the entire grandstand. One of the figures looked up. Their eyes met Kurt's. Time slowed. Kurt moved first. He crossed the distance in 3 steps. His hand found the man's wrist before the gun could rise. A twist, a crack. The weapon clattered to the ground. The FBI agents engaged the others. Gunfire erupted. Muzzle flashes strobed through the darkness. Kurt felt a round pass close enough to hear. He didn't flinch. 2 tangos down, a third trying to reach the detonator. Kurt intercepted him with a shoulder strike that sent them both crashing into an equipment rack. They grappled on the ground. The man was trained, military maybe. He fought with desperate precision, but Kurt had spent 15 years learning to fight when desperate precision wasn't enough. He found the pressure point, applied force. The man went limp. The 4th attacker had reached the detonator. His finger was on the trigger. Kurt drew the sidearm he had taken from the first man, aimed, fired. The shot took the attacker in the shoulder. He spun, dropped the detonator. Kurt was on him before he could recover. Secure. Kurt's voice carried across the staging area. "I need bomb disposal in here now." He knelt beside the detonator, examined the configuration. His hands were steady as he traced the wiring. Standard military design. He had disarmed 100 devices just like it. The last wire separated with a soft click. Kurt sat back on his heels, breathed. Around him, agents secured the attackers, called for medical, reported the situation to command. Kurt didn't hear any of it. He was thinking about Lily, about the fact that he had promised himself he would never do this again, about the fact that some promises were impossible to keep when innocent lives were at stake. Julia Parker arrived at the stadium 90 minutes later. The building was swarming with federal agents, police, media trucks lined up outside like vultures. She found Kurt sitting on a concrete barrier near the east entrance. His tactical vest was discarded beside him. His shirt was torn. There was blood on his hands. She couldn't tell if it was his. She stopped a few feet away, uncertain. "The FBI team leader told me what you did." Her voice was barely above a whisper. "He said you saved the stadium, maybe the whole city." Kurt didn't look at her, just doing what needed to be done. Julia moved closer, sat on the barrier beside him. Her designer suit looked absurd against the concrete. She didn't seem to notice. "I was wrong about you?" Kurt finally turned his head, looked at her. "I was arrogant." Julia's voice cracked slightly. "I looked at you and I saw what I wanted to see. A worker, someone beneath my notice, someone whose opinion didn't matter because he didn't have the right credentials or the right title or the right education." She stared at the stadium, at the building that had nearly become a mass grave. "My father built this company from nothing. When he died, I was so afraid of losing it, afraid of being seen as weak, afraid that everyone was waiting for me to fail. So I became someone who never listened, never admitted doubt, never let anyone see that I didn't have all the answers." She looked at Kurt. Her eyes were bright with unshed tears. "You tried to tell me. You showed me the gaps. And I threw it back in your face because admitting you were right would have meant admitting I was wrong." Kurt said nothing. Those people in the staging area. Julia's voice dropped. "The security guards who got hurt. That's on me. I put my pride ahead of their safety." Silence stretched between them, the sound of helicopters overhead, the flash of emergency lights. Finally, Kurt spoke. "The man I used to be, he would have found a way to make you listen, would have pushed harder. done whatever it took to make sure those gaps got fixed. He looked down at his bloodied hands. But that man got people killed too. Different people, different circumstances, same result. He clenched his fists. I told myself I could leave that life behind, become someone normal, someone who went home every night and cooked dinner for his daughter and didn't carry the weight of other people's lives. His voice was rough, but the truth is you can't unsee what I've seen, can't unlearn what I know. When I looked at that security document, I didn't see paper and protocols. I saw 50,000 targets, 50,000 potential casualties, 50,000 families who might not go home. Julia wiped her eyes. How do you live with that? Kurt was quiet for a long moment. I have a daughter. His voice softened. Lily. She's 10, has asthma that scares me more than anything I faced overseas. Every night I watch her breathe while she sleeps, count the seconds between each exhale. He looked at the sky. The first stars were emerging through the fading light. She's why I load trucks instead of running security operations. Why I said no to the colonel when he called. Why I tried to walk away from all of this. But you didn't walk away. No. Kurt's voice was heavy. Because some things matter more than what I want. Those people in the stadium, they're someone's daughter, someone's son, someone's reason to count seconds while they sleep. Julia absorbed his words, the weight of them settling over her. What happens now? She asked finally. Now I go home. Kurt stood slowly. His body ached in ways it hadn't for years. I make dinner for my kid, help her with her homework, pretend today didn't happen. Julia stood too. She looked at him differently now, seeing not the dock worker or the special operator, but something more complicated. The company owes you more than I can calculate. Her voice was formal but genuine. Whatever you want, whatever position, whatever salary, name it, and it's yours. Kurt almost smiled. I don't want a position, Ms. Parker. I just want to load my trucks and go home to my daughter. After everything, after what you did today, you just want to go back to the loading dock. What I did today isn't who I want to be. Kurt's voice was steady. It's who I used to be. There's a difference. He started walking toward the stadium exit. Julia watched him go. Wait, she called after him. At least let me. There must be something. Kurt paused, turned back. Your security protocols, he said simply. Fix them. Not just for this stadium. For every venue, every event, every contract. Hire people who know what to look for. Actually listen when they tell you something's wrong. Julia nodded slowly. I will. And maybe. Kurt hesitated. Maybe stop looking at people like they're inventory to be assessed. The guy loading trucks might know something. The woman cleaning floors might see something. Everyone has value, even the ones without fancy titles. Julia's face flushed with shame, but she held his gaze. You're a better person than me, Mr. Roberts. Kurt shook his head. I'm just a dad who wants to go home to his kid. That doesn't make me good, just makes me human. He walked away into the gathering darkness. 3 weeks later, Kurt stood in the break room at Parker Logistics. The same worn coffee machine, the same faded posters about workplace safety, the same fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. But something had changed. The other workers looked at him differently now. Word had spread despite Kurt's attempts to keep quiet. The dock supervisor who had stopped a terrorist attack. The quiet guy with the classified past. Frank appeared in the doorway, grinning broadly. Hey, hero, someone here to see you. Kurt walked to the loading dock, stopped short. Julia Parker stood near the entrance, but she looked different, softer somehow. Her hair was down, her clothes were professional but not aggressive, and beside her stood a young woman in a business suit carrying a thick folder. Miss Parker, Kurt's voice was cautious. Something I can help you with? Julia smiled. It was the first genuine smile he had ever seen from her. Actually, yes. She gestured to the young woman beside her. This is Dr. Sarah Chen. She's the head of our new security assessment division. I created the position after. Well, After you showed me how blind I'd been. Dr. Chen extended her hand. Mr. Roberts, your analysis of the Morrison Stadium vulnerabilities was the most thorough security assessment I've ever reviewed. We've implemented every recommendation. Kurt shook her hand. Just did what anyone would do. Number? Julia's voice was firm. You did what no one else could do, because no one else was looking. She paused. That's actually why I'm here. Kurt waited. I'm not offering you a job, Julia said. I know you'd refuse. But I am offering you something else. She handed him an envelope. Kurt opened it. Inside was a document with official letterhead. It's a scholarship fund, Julia explained. Full medical coverage and educational support for Lily. Everything paid through age 25, college, graduate school, whatever she wants. Kurt stared at the paper. His hands trembled slightly. I can't accept this. You can. Julia's voice was gentle. Because it's not about what you did at the stadium. It's about what you taught me. She took a breath. I spent my whole life measuring people by what they could do for me, by their credentials and their connections and their usefulness. She looked at the warehouse around them, the workers moving through their routines. You showed me that I was looking at the wrong things, that the person loading trucks might be the most valuable person in the building, that worth isn't measured by titles or salaries or stock prices. Kurt was silent. Let me do this. Julia's voice cracked slightly. Not because I owe you, but because your daughter deserves to grow up without her father worrying about medical bills and tuition payments. She deserves to have options. She deserves to know that her dad's sacrifice meant something. Kurt looked at the envelope, at the document that represented security for Lily's future. His vision blurred. Thank you. The words came out rough. Julia nodded. She understood that it cost him something to accept. There's one more thing. She pulled out her phone, showed him a video. On the screen, a stadium appeared. Morrison Stadium, packed with 50,000 fans, cheering, laughing, families with children. The game happened, Julia said, last weekend, because of you. Kurt watched the video, watched the joy on faces that would never know how close they had come. Dad? Kurt turned. Lily was standing in the loading dock entrance. His neighbor, Mrs. Chen, had brought her. Lily's eyes were wide. She had seen Julia, the expensive clothes, the obvious importance. Is everything okay? Kurt closed the distance between them, knelt down so they were eye level. Everything's great, Bug. He pulled her into a hug, better than great. Lily hugged him back, then looked up at Julia with the fearless curiosity of a 10-year-old. Are you my dad's boss? Julia smiled. Something like that. Lily studied her. You look kind of scary. Kurt choked back a laugh. Julia's eyes widened. Then she laughed too, a real laugh. You know what? Julia knelt down to Lily's level. You're absolutely right. I used to be pretty scary, but your dad taught me that being scary isn't the same as being strong. Lily considered this. My dad knows everything. Not everything, Kurt said, but he's working on it. Lily grinned, then looked at Julia. Do you have any kids? Number. Julia's voice softened. Lily nodded sagely. That's probably why you were so scary. Kids make you nicer. She looked at Kurt. Right, Dad? Kurt pulled her close. Right, Bug. Kids make you nicer, and braver, and more afraid, all at the same time. Julia watched them, saw something she had never allowed herself to want. I should go, but Mr. Roberts, Kurt, if you ever change your mind about anything. She pressed a card into his hand. You know where to find me. Your daughter is lucky. Kurt looked at Lily. I'm the lucky one. That night, Kurt made spaghetti, Lily's favorite. They sat at their small kitchen table while steam rose between them. Dad, what did that lady really want? She wanted to say thank you. For what? For reminding her what's important. Lily nodded. What's important? Kurt touched her hand. This, right here. Dinner with my favorite person, coming home every night, being here for the moments that matter. Later, Kurt sat beside her bed while the nebulizer hummed. He read to her from the Dragon Book, watched her eyes grow heavy. He sat there long after she drifted off, counting seconds between breaths. The medals were still in the box beneath his bed. The phone still held numbers for people who would call if the world needed saving. But here in this small apartment with his sleeping daughter and the ordinary extraordinary gift of another peaceful night, Kurt Roberts understood something. Some people think heroes are the ones who charge into danger, the ones who face impossible odds. But the truest heroism happens in kitchens and bedrooms and quiet moments when no one is watching. It happens when a father works double shifts so his daughter can breathe easier. When ordinary people show up day after day for the people who need them. Kurt had been both kinds of hero. He had stormed buildings and saved lives that would never know his name. But this was harder, this quiet heroism, this daily choice to be present. This was the mission that mattered most. He leaned down, kissed her forehead. Love you, Bug. Then he went to bed. Tomorrow would bring more trucks to load, more ordinary moments that meant everything. And somewhere in the city, Julia Parker sat in her empty office thinking about a man in oil-stained clothes who had taught her more about leadership than her Harvard MBA ever had. Because Kurt Roberts had shown her that worth was not about credentials or titles. It was about showing up, about paying attention, about caring enough to do what was right even when it cost you everything. Subscribe if you believe true heroes are the ones who show up every day for the people who need them most.